The morning sun barely kissed the rooftops of Maplewood Crossings as Malik adjusted the small bird feeder under the giant oak tree in his front yard. It was a ritual he had picked up since coming home, a simple act of peace in a world that hadn't always been kind. The soft chirp of sparrows filled the air, blending with the distant hum of sprinklers starting up across the neatly trimmed lawns. Malik, a broad-shouldered man with a calm presence that belied his years overseas, tightened the string and stepped back to admire his work. His dark skin glistened slightly under the sun, his muscles relaxed, his expression peaceful. The tranquility shattered when a voice sliced through the air like a blade. "Hey, that's a code violation." Malik turned his head slowly. Striding up the sidewalk was Karen Mitchell, clipboard clutched to her chest like a weapon, her eyes sharp and full of authority she didn't rightfully own. 2 steps behind her, Randy lumbered along, badge flashing on his belt, mirrored sunglasses hiding eyes full of self-importance. Karen's lips twisted into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Randy rested his hand casually near his holster, projecting authority he had no right to enforce here. Malik said nothing. He didn't move. He simply wiped his hands on his jeans and waited. "You're in violation of HOA Code 6.8b, Karen announced, lifting her clipboard like a shield. "Unauthorized wildlife attractant device. That's a $300 fine." Randy stepped forward, puffing his chest like he was preparing for a brawl. He pulled his badge out farther, making sure it caught the morning light. Malik glanced at the bird feeder, then back at them. His voice was steady, almost bored. "It's a bird feeder," he said. Randy's hand twitched toward his holster again. "You're being non-compliant," Randy growled. "That's grounds for escalation." Without hesitation, Randy drew his weapon. The metallic click of the gun leaving its holster cut through the still morning like a thunderclap. Randy raised it, finger tense on the trigger, aiming straight at Malik's chest, in broad daylight, on private property, over a bird feeder. Karen stood behind him, arms folded, smug satisfaction radiating from her like cheap perfume. The neighbors' blinds fluttered. Somewhere, a lawnmower abruptly shut off. The world held its breath. Malik didn't flinch. He didn't raise his hands. He didn't step back. Instead, he smiled. Not a friendly smile. Not a scared smile. It was the kind of slow, chilling smile that said without a single word, "You just made the worst mistake of your life." His hands remained at his sides, loose and easy, like he had all the time in the world. His body language said he wasn't afraid. It said he knew something Randy didn't. Randy's face faltered, just for a second, confusion flickering behind his mirrored shades. "You're making a big mistake," Malik said quietly, his voice low and even. Karen barked a laugh, mistaking Malik's calm for submission. Randy tightened his grip on the weapon, his hands starting to shake just slightly. Malik's smile deepened, a barely-there curve of his lips that radiated pure, unnerving confidence. Because what Karen and Randy didn't know, what not a single soul in Maplewood Crossings yet realized, was that Malik wasn't just a quiet son helping his retired parents keep up their home. He was Special Forces trained. He was legally armed. And every single second of this encounter was already being recorded, from 3 different angles. The air between them crackled, the moment suspended in perfect, terrifying silence. Malik didn't need to raise his voice. He didn't need to show his weapon. He didn't even need to move. Because in that moment, standing calm with a gun pointed at him, he had already won. And Randy, he just didn't know it yet. 2 months earlier, Maplewood Crossings looked exactly like the brochure promised. Tree-lined streets, identical mailboxes, manicured lawns trimmed like they were measured with a ruler. A quiet community where everyone smiled, waved, and minded their business, at least on the surface. Harold and Denise moved there for peace. After years of hard work, they had earned a place where mornings would smell like fresh-cut grass and evenings would hum with crickets and porch lights. A place where you could sip coffee without wondering if today was the day trouble knocked on your door. For a while, it felt like they had found it. Malik arrived a few weeks after his parents settled in. His homecoming was quiet, just like him. No parades, no big welcome signs, just a strong hug from his mother, a firm handshake from his father, and a silent prayer of gratitude that he had made it back in one piece. He wasn't looking for attention. He wasn't looking for trouble. Malik simply wanted to exist. Mow the lawn on Sundays, help his father fix the fence, sip coffee with his mother under the big oak tree. But Maplewood Crossings had an undercurrent most people didn't talk about. It started small. The long, lingering stares when Malik drove through the gates in his black F-250. The tight smiles that never quite reached the eyes. The way conversations seemed to shift when he approached, laughter dying mid-sentence like a switch had been flipped. Harold brushed it off. "They're just not used to new faces," he said, trying to keep the peace. Denise smiled through it, but Malik saw the tightness in her jaw, the way her fingers curled a little too tightly around her coffee mug when certain neighbors walked by. Still, Malik gave them grace. He'd seen worse. Much worse. On Sunday mornings, he rolled out of bed early, started the mower before the sun could bake the grass. He trimmed the hedges, repainted the fence, even helped Mrs. Lennox 3 doors down carry her groceries without being asked. There was a rhythm to life. Simple, predictable, safe. Until the clipboard appeared. Karen Mitchell, the self-appointed Queen of Maplewood, arrived with her sharp smile and sharper eyes, a woman who wore her authority like a crown no one had ever officially given her. At first, it was small things, a note about the slightly faded American flag, a reminder about approved color schemes for front doors. It would have been laughable if not for the way she said it. Like a warning, not a suggestion. Malik listened politely. Harold thanked her for her concern. Denise baked cookies and left them at Karen's door, a silent peace offering. It didn't matter, because no amount of kindness would change the fact that Malik didn't look like what Karen thought a Maplewood resident should look like. The first fine came 2 weeks later, $50 for a garden hose, visible from the street. Harold paid it without argument. The second fine came after Malik washed his truck in the driveway. Excessive vehicle water runoff, another $50. The third fine came when Malik planted a small bed of wildflowers near the mailbox, a project he had started to help his mother feel more at home. Unauthorized landscaping, a $100 violation. Denise's eyes filled with tears when she opened that notice. Malik took it from her hands, read it slowly, then folded it neatly and placed it in the kitchen drawer. "We'll handle it," he said quietly. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't complain. He simply got quieter, sharper, more careful. He stopped parking his truck even a single inch over the driveway line. He double-checked the mailbox height with a measuring tape. He measured the lawn twice before mowing, making sure it stayed within the approved length. And still, the notices came. Neighbors who once waved stopped making eye contact. Conversations at the community center hushed when Malik entered the room. Rumors whispered like smoke. Complaints about large vehicles. Concerns about non-standard residents. Fears about the character of the neighborhood. Through it all, Malik said nothing, because Malik knew something they didn't. He wasn't just a veteran. He wasn't just a son helping his retired parents. He was trained to survive in environments far more hostile than manicured suburbia. And if Maplewood Crossings wanted a war, they just didn't realize who they were picking it with yet. For now, Malik played the part. The polite son, the silent neighbor, the calm before the storm. And every morning, under the old oak tree, he sipped his coffee and waited. Because storms don't announce themselves with thunder. They build quietly, one drop, one cloud, one wrong move at a time. It started on a Tuesday. Malik had just finished mowing the lawn, sweat dripping down his neck, the sun beating down mercilessly. He turned off the mower, grabbed a bottle of water, and sat on the porch steps to catch his breath. That's when he noticed Karen. She was standing on the sidewalk, arms crossed, clipboard tucked tight under her elbow like it was a lifeline. Randy hovered beside her, his sunglasses reflecting the midday glare, his stance wide and aggressive like he was daring someone to challenge him. Malik set the bottle down, stood up slowly, wiping his hands on his jeans. Karen approached first. "Your vehicle," she said, her voice clipped and cold, "violates the neighborhood parking standards." Malik blinked. His truck was parked perfectly inside the driveway lines, nothing overhanging the sidewalk, not even by an inch. He said nothing, just waited. "It's oversized," Karen snapped, pulling a paper from her clipboard. F-250S are considered heavy-duty. Heavy-duty vehicles require special clearance under Maplewood Crossings HOA Code 5.2 inches. Randy shifted, his hand resting casually near his belt again. Malik noticed, noted it, filed it away. "This is private property," Malik said, voice calm, even respectful. Karen's smile tightened. "Common areas include visual impact zones. Your vehicle disrupts the aesthetic harmony of the community." Malik stared at her for a long moment, then nodded once. Karen, not satisfied, leaned in slightly. "You people think the rules don't apply to you." There it was, the first open crack in the polished suburban armor. Randy smirked but said nothing. Malik didn't react. He turned, walked back up the porch steps, and disappeared into the house without another word. But the fine came anyway. A notice slapped onto the front door the next morning. $250 for unauthorized vehicle dimensions. Malik paid it. Silently, patiently. Because he understood something Karen didn't. Paper trails spoke louder than arguments, and patience was deadlier than anger. But it didn't stop there. 3 days later, Malik was cited for non-compliant lawn ornamentation, a small American flag planted near the mailbox for Memorial Day. A neighbor 2 streets over was fined for having faded porch cushions after hosting Malik's family for coffee. The Johnsons, who had waved at Malik every morning, suddenly had a complaint filed against them for excessive patio furniture. It wasn't about the truck. It wasn't about the flag. It wasn't about the bird feeder. It was about Malik. It was about control. Randy started showing up more often, sometimes in uniform, sometimes not, always lurking, always watching, pretending to check meters, pretending to ensure safety, but really just patrolling one house, Malik's house. One afternoon, Malik came home from a grocery run to find Randy parked at the curb, sitting in his cruiser, sunglasses on, arms folded. Malik pulled into the driveway slowly, deliberately. He unloaded his groceries, locked the truck, and walked inside without acknowledging him. but he felt Randy's stare burning into his back the whole way. The next day, Harold found a warning notice stuck to their mailbox. Improper flag dimensions again. Denise found a note taped to the front window. A violation for unapproved backyard structures, meaning the tiny swing Malik had installed for his niece when she visited. It was a siege, a quiet, constant, exhausting siege. One by one, the neighbors started retreating, pulling their support back into their houses. Conversations grew shorter. Smiles disappeared altogether. Fear had a way of spreading faster than weeds. And Malik, ever the soldier, recognized the tactics immediately. Isolate, intimidate, control. They weren't trying to enforce rules, they were trying to break him. But they underestimated just how deeply Malik's roots were planted. Not in the soil of Maplewood Crossings, but in something much older, much stronger. He didn't argue. He didn't protest. He documented. Every fine, every note, every unwanted visit, every word Karen and Randy said within earshot. He installed new security cameras, legal ones, hidden among the hedges, tucked under the porch awning, discreet but all-seeing. He collected screenshots of every notice, every false claim, every moment of petty harassment. And he waited, because war, he knew, was not won by who struck first. It was won by who struck smartest. The real breaking point came not with a fine, but with an insult. Late one evening, Malik was returning from a jog, earbuds in, sweat dampening his shirt, when he saw Randy parked in the cul-de-sac again. He ignored him, kept walking. That's when Randy rolled down the window and muttered, loud enough for Malik to hear, "You don't belong here." Malik stopped mid-step. Not because of fear, because of the certainty that everything was about to change. He turned his head slowly, locked eyes with Randy across the distance, and gave him the smallest nod. The kind of nod that said, "I heard you. I see you. And you just crossed a line you can't uncross." Randy smirked, thinking he had won. Malik just walked away. No words, no anger. Just quiet. Gathering thunder. Because sometimes battles aren't fought with fists. Sometimes the strongest answer is silence. The kind that says, you don't even know what's coming. And Randy had no idea the storm he had just summoned. The day the truth surfaced, the sky over Maplewood Crossings was a pale, cloudless blue. A deceptive calm stretched over the cul-de-sac, masking the storm brewing underneath. Malik knew it was coming. He had known for weeks. He watched from the porch as Karen marched up the sidewalk again, clipboard bouncing against her chest, Randy 2 steps behind her, hand casually resting near his holster. The same tired routine, the same arrogance. Only this time, Malik was ready. He stood up slowly, brushing non-existent dust from his jeans, his face unreadable. He waited until they reached the base of the steps. "You're in violation again," Karen barked, waving the clipboard like a weapon. Unauthorized wildlife attraction devices and non-compliant vehicle dimensions. Randy narrowed his eyes, muscles tense under his uniform. Malik tilted his head, considering them like a man studying 2 insects crawling toward a flame. "You're escalating a code violation into a law enforcement matter," Malik said, his voice calm as still water. Karen scoffed. "If you don't comply, we'll escalate it further." And that was the moment Randy did it. Right there on Malik's front lawn, in front of God, and every nosy neighbor peeking from behind their curtains, Randy reached for his holster and pulled his gun. The black barrel pointed straight at Malik's chest. His finger hovered dangerously near the trigger. Malik didn't move, didn't flinch. Instead, a slow, cold smile curved across his lips. "This is being recorded," Malik said evenly. "No panic, no fear, just absolute certainty." Karen laughed, shrill and nervous. "Recording won't save you." Malik didn't answer. He just stepped aside slightly, revealing a small, blinking red light tucked beneath the porch roof. Karen's smile faltered. Across the street, the neighbor's blinds shifted, a phone camera clearly visible. And strapped across Malik's own chest, barely noticeable under his jacket, was a slim body cam, already live, already uploading. Randy's hand trembled slightly. He shifted his feet, suddenly unsure. Malik took one quiet step forward, lowering his voice to a level that forced them to lean in. "I filed for a restraining order last week," Malik said. "It was approved this morning." Karen's mouth opened, closed. Confusion flickered across her face. "You stepped onto private property, armed, after being legally barred from approaching," Malik continued, each word measured, lethal. "That's violation of a court order. And pointing a weapon?" He let the silence stretch, savoring the moment. "That's assault with a deadly weapon." Randy's face went pale under his tan skin. His gun wavered, the barrel dipping ever so slightly. Somewhere behind them, tires screeched against asphalt. A second cruiser pulled into the cul-de-sac. Real deputies this time. Badges shining, uniforms crisp, authority legitimate. Karen spun around, her clipboard slipping from her hands, papers fluttering like wounded birds across the neatly trimmed grass. One deputy barked, "Drop the weapon! Hands where we can see them." Randy froze. For one absurd second, it looked like he might argue. Then reality crashed down, and he slowly set the gun on the ground, raising his hands. Karen shrieked something unintelligible, backing away with wild eyes. Malik remained perfectly still, arms crossed over his chest, watching the scene unfold like a man who had seen far worse and lived to tell the tale. The deputies cuffed Randy on the spot, reading him his rights as the neighbors cautiously emerged from their homes, phones recording, whispers rippling through the street. One of the officers retrieved Randy's discarded weapon, logging it carefully into evidence. Another officer approached Malik respectfully. "Sir, are you all right?" he asked. Malik nodded once. "I'm fine." No drama, no grandstanding, just facts. Randy was escorted to the cruiser, head bowed, face burning with humiliation. Karen tried to follow, blabbering excuses, but another deputy stopped her, quietly informing her that she too was under investigation for harassment, misuse of authority, and conspiracy to violate civil rights. The clipboard was bagged as evidence. Malik watched them go, his face unreadable. No celebration, no taunting, just quiet, unshakable strength. Because he hadn't fought this battle with anger or violence. He fought it with patience, with discipline, with the quiet power of the truth. And now, standing on the same lawn where they had tried to break him, Malik realized something even more satisfying than revenge. They had already lost long before today. They just didn't know it. Until now. By the next morning, Maplewood Crossings was buzzing like a kicked beehive. Neighbors who had stayed silent for months now huddled on sidewalks, whispering, swapping theories. Some deleted old messages from Karen's HOA bulletin board. Others quietly gathered their own stacks of notices and fines. The perfect little community wasn't so perfect anymore, and everyone knew exactly who cracked it open. Malik sat on the porch, coffee in hand, watching it unfold without a word. The knock came around noon. Two county investigators, crisp suits and calm expressions, flashing badges that spoke louder than any clipboard Karen ever waved. They weren't here for pleasantries. They carried questions, and Malik had answers. They listened carefully as Malik laid everything out: the pattern of harassment, the selective enforcement, the racial targeting hidden behind legal jargon. He showed them the security footage, the copies of the bogus fines, the record of the restraining order served and violated. Every piece of evidence was lined up, time-stamped, categorized. Months of quiet preparation now came crashing down like an avalanche. Across the street, Karen's door slammed shut when she spotted the investigators. It didn't matter, because the system she had hidden behind was no longer protecting her. It was coming for her. The investigation moved fast, faster than even Malik expected. Maybe it was the overwhelming evidence. Maybe it was the fact that too many people had been hurt, fined, and bullied for too long. Or maybe, just maybe, the sight of a decorated Special Forces veteran standing calm against the worst of suburban corruption was enough to make even the slowest bureaucracy remember what justice was supposed to look like. Within days, neighbors started talking, officially. Anonymous statements poured in. The Johnsons submitted pictures of Karen trespassing to measure mailbox heights in the middle of the night. Mrs. Lennox, who had once been fined for excessive lawn decor, handed over a folder of 27 violations, all issued after she hosted Malik's family for Thanksgiving dinner. Even Randy's own deputy supervisors came forward, confirming that Randy had a history of overstepping, though no one had pushed hard enough to make it stick. Until now. Karen tried to fight back. She sent out desperate emails to the neighborhood, spinning herself as the victim, painting Malik as aggressive, trying to whip up fear. But nobody was buying it anymore. The real turning point came when the county demanded access to the HOA financial records. Karen resisted, stalled, claimed technical difficulties, cited privacy rules. The investigators didn't blink. They served a formal subpoena, and what they found ripped the last shred of legitimacy from Karen's hands. Thousands of dollars in unapproved spending. Security cameras bought without votes. Maintenance fees funneled into personal accounts. Illegal amendments to the HOA charter typed up and voted on in meetings where no quorum was present, because Karen had rewritten the quorum rules too. The more they dug, the worse it got. And Malik? He kept sipping his coffee every morning. Same spot on the porch. Same slow, watchful gaze as the empire of lies collapsed piece by piece. The county board issued a formal statement. Maplewood Crossings HOA was under official investigation for civil rights violations, misuse of community funds, and abuse of authority. Karen was placed on immediate administrative suspension. Randy, still sitting in a holding cell, faced both criminal and civil charges. A special meeting was called, not by Karen this time, but by real officials. An open forum where residents could voice their grievances under legal protection. Malik attended, silent at the back of the crowded hall. He didn't speak unless asked. He didn't need to, because by now everyone knew. They knew who had stood quietly while injustice grew roots. They knew who had collected the proof when no one else dared. They knew who had turned the tables without firing a single shot. The man they had once feared was the man who had freed them. Malik didn't need applause. He didn't need banners. He just needed the truth to be louder than the lies. And now, finally, it was. The day of the hearing, the Maplewood Crossings Community Center looked nothing like the glossy pictures in the HOA brochures. Folding chairs packed the room. Neighbors who hadn't spoken to each other in months sat shoulder to shoulder, clutching manila folders, printed emails, even snapshots of fines pinned to their doors. The air was heavy, not with fear anymore, but with something sharper. Expectation. At the front of the room, a panel of county officials waited behind a long folding table. Their faces were unreadable, their pens poised over thick notepads. Karen stood near the podium, still clutching her clipboard like it could save her. She wore a pearl necklace and a stiff smile, the image of someone who thought if she looked professional enough, the truth wouldn't matter. Malik sat in the back row. No uniform, no speeches, just a quiet presence. Steady, immovable, like a weight holding the room together. The hearing began. Karen went first, her voice overly bright, dripping with false concern. She spoke of maintaining community standards, of preserving property values, of ensuring a safe environment. She never mentioned Malik by name, but everyone knew who she meant when she complained about residents who refuse to assimilate. The panel listened politely. They nodded. They took notes. But when Karen tried to hand over her own evidence, a binder full of edited photos and selectively quoted bylaws, one of the officials gently pushed it aside. "We've already reviewed the official records," he said. "We're here to hear the residents now." Karen's smile faltered. The Johnsons spoke first, calm, respectful. They described how Karen fined them for having unapproved curtain colors, the same beige curtains installed by the developer. Mrs. Lennox followed, her voice trembling with anger. She told them about the night Karen trespassed onto her porch, measuring her flower pots under cover of darkness. More voices rose. Stories tumbled out. Harassment over Christmas lights. Threats of fines for watering lawns at the wrong time. Citations for imaginary violations. Every story wove a tapestry of pettiness, cruelty, and control. And then it was Malik's turn. He didn't stand at the podium. He didn't raise his voice. He simply passed forward a thick, meticulously organized folder. Inside, timestamps, security footage stills, violation letters, copies of restraining orders, financial irregularities, screenshots of Karen approving her own reimbursement checks without any recorded vote. Evidence so overwhelming that it needed no explanation. One of the officials flipped through the pages, his jaw tightening as he read. The silence in the room grew heavy. Karen fidgeted, tugging at her necklace, darting glances toward the exits like she was calculating escape routes. Finally, the lead investigator spoke. "Ms. Mitchell, based on the overwhelming evidence and testimony, you are hereby removed from your position as HOA President of Maplewood Crossings, effective immediately. A full audit will be conducted, and your actions referred to the District Attorney's Office for potential criminal charges." Karen gasped. She opened her mouth to argue, but no words came out. Somewhere in the back of the room, someone clapped. Another joined. And then the whole room erupted into applause. Not loud, not mocking, but steady. Triumphant. Karen turned, clipboard still clutched to her chest like a broken shield, and stumbled down the aisle, the crowd parting around her like she was something contagious. Randy wasn't there. He had already been formally charged and stripped of his badge. His trial would come later. Today was Karen's day to fall. And fall she did. Malik watched her go without a word. No smirk, no satisfaction dancing across his face. Just quiet, steady peace. Because real victory wasn't about seeing her humiliated. It was about seeing justice finally tip back into balance. Over the next few weeks, everything changed. A temporary HOA board was appointed. Real neighbors, real volunteers, people who remembered what community was supposed to mean. The ridiculous codes about truck sizes and garden gnomes were thrown out. Bird feeders were reinstated with full approval. Holiday decorations were encouraged. Pride flags, American flags, Black Lives Matter banners, all welcomed. No questions asked. Karen tried to move to a nearby town, but the story followed her. News outlets picked it up. Local HOA president ousted after racism scandal. It spread across social media, headlines snapping behind her wherever she went. Malik stayed, because this was his home, because they didn't get to push him out. One morning, he stood under the old oak tree, hanging a new bird feeder. This one painted bright red, white, and blue. Harold leaned on his cane nearby, grinning. Denise snapped a photo, laughing for the first time in months. The sky stretched wide and open overhead. And for the first time in a long time, Malik wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. He wasn't looking over his shoulder. He wasn't bracing for another fine tucked under the doormat. He was just home. The kind of peace you earn. The kind of freedom you fight for without lifting a single fist. Because sometimes the strongest victories are the ones nobody sees coming. The ones won with patience, with proof, with quiet, unstoppable strength, and a smile that says, "You picked the wrong man." The weeks after Karen's fall felt like a second spring in Maplewood Crossings. Lawns that had once stood in rigid, fearful uniformity now blossomed with personality. Bird feeders hung proudly from porches. Garden gnomes peeked out from under rose bushes. American flags waved freely alongside pride banners, and even a few handmade Black Lives Matter signs. The fear was gone. In its place, something new had taken root. Real community. Neighbors who had once crossed the street to avoid each other now shared coffees on their front lawns. Mrs. Lennox hosted a barbecue, the smell of grilled ribs and sweet corn thick in the air. The Johnsons organized a neighborhood movie night, white sheets strung between trees, children laughing under the stars. And through it all, Malik remained quietly at the center of it. Not leading, not commanding, just being. One afternoon, he and Harold stood side by side, watching the kids race bicycles up and down the street. Denise rocked gently in a chair, a glass of sweet tea sweating in her hand, a book forgotten in her lap. Harold nudged Malik with his elbow. "You did that," he said, voice low, pride thick in every word. Malik shook his head. They did it. They just needed someone to remind them they could. Across the street, where Randy used to park and watch like a hawk, a small herb garden now bloomed, rosemary, basil, lavender swaying in the breeze. A handmade sign stuck in the soil read, "Community grown, community strong." The old oak tree, once the site of so much tension, stood taller than ever. Malik had rehung the bird feeder there, bright and swinging, welcoming cardinals and blue jays back to their rightful place. Late one evening, Malik sat alone on the porch steps, the sky melting into deep purples and golds. A soft clink sounded beside him. Denise set down a fresh cup of coffee, patted his shoulder, and left him to the twilight. Malik sipped slowly, watching the feeder sway. Peace had a sound. It wasn't loud, it wasn't triumphant. It was soft, like crickets in the grass, like distant laughter, like the creak of a rocking chair on a quiet porch. It was the sound of winning without violence, the sound of standing your ground without ever raising your voice, the sound of being seen. Malik didn't smile often, but sitting there with the last light brushing the tops of the trees, he let himself. Because this wasn't just about a bird feeder. It wasn't just about Karen or Randy or even the hundreds of dollars in bogus fines. It was about the invisible battles people fought every day. Battles against prejudice, against small-minded cruelty, against the slow erosion of dignity. And it was about winning those battles not with fists, not with rage, but with something far stronger: patience, truth, and the unshakable belief that some things, respect, decency, freedom, are worth standing for, no matter how long it takes. A breeze kicked up, sending the bird feeder into a lazy spin. Somewhere down the street, a child's laughter echoed into the dusk. Malik closed his eyes for a moment, breathing it all in. This was the victory no headline would capture. This was the revenge no courtroom could deliver. This was the kind of peace that comes only after you've earned it the hard way. The kind of peace that cannot be stolen by a clipboard, a badge, or a small-minded rulebook. He opened his eyes and looked out across the neighborhood, at the herb gardens, at the colorful porches, at the waving flags, at the people finally living, not just existing. He raised his coffee cup slightly in a silent toast. To freedom, to resilience, to home. And as the last light of day slipped behind the rooftops of Maplewood Crossings, Malik knew, deep in his bones, that this time, the peace was real, and it was here to stay.